All right, it's SIP episode 103. And tonight we're discussing mastering the restaurant wine list. Just hearing that thud on the table can produce anxiety if you are the one that has to order the wine. No more. Tonight's guest is going to walk us through how you can own that list and order wine like a pro. Sit back, SIP episode 103 is here. I am Martin Cody with Cellar Angels, co-founder of the direct-to-consumer digital online wine company, Cellar Angels, where we specialize exclusively in limited production wineries from Napa and Sonoma. And knowing that, it seems odd that our guest this evening is in Oregon. So we'll get to that in a second. But I do want to let you know that this is SIP episode 103, if the notes are accurate. And I also want to let you know, have you been actually scanning your QR code on your canteen? Because it changes every single week. So go ahead and grab that. We make a little bit of change, a little bit of edit every single week. For those of you that don't have a canteen, you have to join Wine Club. What better way to join Wine Club to get a canteen and also great wines? Also, it's Friday. SIP happens. Okay, so week is gone. No worries. We're going to sit back and relax. And we're going to talk about a subject which has paralyzed many people when they hand the wine list to you at the restaurant and all eyes are on you and you think, oh boy, what do I do? We have some foolproof guides this evening and tips and tricks to be able to navigate that like a professional. Mission Control is not in the control room right now. Mission Control is with us, but with us remotely. So what could possibly go wrong? We are also going to talk this evening. Hopefully some of you opened a bottle of Waxwing. Waxwing is one of these small limited production wineries that we have been helping for 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. But sadly, it wasn't enough due to the pandemic and due to no travel and due to no tasting room visits. They had to actually close their doors, which is a shame. There are only 5 bottles left on the website. And it's something that if you haven't had Waxwing Pinot Noir, our guest is drinking it, I'm drinking it. It is an amazing Pinot Noir, and really it's a collectible one now because you can't get any more of it. So where can you get that bottle of wine? You get it from the Cellar Angels website, of course. If this is your first time here, many of the folks this evening have acquired what is referred to as the SIP kit. It's your survival in the wilderness necessary item because the wilderness is your 9-to-5 work day, and this gets you through. It will have, as you can see, 5 wines that will be good for the next 5 Fridays. The Waxwing that I referenced is here. It's from the Deer Heart Vineyard in the Santa Cruz Mountains, an incredible vineyard, but it is just a delicious bottle of wine. Next week, we have a Chianti, and a Chianti is going to be featured as a Scotland, which is where we open up 2 bottles of wine in honor of Scotland, whose last name I cannot pronounce, but I'm sure is on. But that is going to be the following week, but definitely grab yourself a SIP kit. You can sip along. If you don't grab a SIP kit, you can buy anything on the site anytime you want. And it's all about supporting the limited production wineries. And on that note, I wanted to let you know that, yes, we did conclude a masterful trip a couple weeks ago in wine country. And it was amazing to hear not only the episode preceding our visit to wine country with the Noir Winery, where they echoed and said, thank you so much, Angels. We heard it from Dot Wines. We heard it from Montan Roos. We heard it from Ron family. All of them are saying the Angels are amazing. And that's you folks. You're the ones that are amazing. You're the ones that are helping the limited production wineries, and you are exceptional. So thank you so much for all your support. It means the world to them and to us. And one of the things we always try to do is make certain that you have knowledge, you have skills, and you're always learning, laughing, and engaging. And tonight's guest is to call her a wine professional is basically understating it. We are happy, Mission Control and I, humbled, privileged to not only call her a colleague, but we can also call her a friend. Meghan Vandette, we have known since 2012. Oh no, my gosh, probably 2009, 2008. She was instrumental in our bricks and mortar wine store operation. She is a chef. She has been working at a distributor. She works with, you'll have to Maison, what was the Henry, sparkling wine producer? Lay it on me.
No. Champagne on Rio.
Champagne on Rio. She is a Jane of all trades, one of the hardest working people we know. And tonight she's going to expertly guide us into how to order wine from a restaurant wine list without making a mockery of yourself or the wine list. Ladies and gentlemen, Meghan Vandette is in the house. Cheers,
Hi,
Meghan.
everybody. Hello, cheers. Happy Friday. And also I'd like to add to Martin's lovely introduction that Denise and Martin actually gave me my first job in the wine industry all those years ago. So any mistakes I make, you can blame on them.
She doesn't make many. If there's one thing she probably misses, it's those late nights of bubbles with the girls after the door is shut and you're just cleaning up and ringing the till and counting the receipts and solving world problems. Because
the good old days. The
good old days is right. So we wanted to kind of touch base on this topic because it's dependent upon the restaurant that you go to and the extensiveness of the wine list. There has been, and I know I suffered from this very early on, where you're entertaining clients and you're the guest, or you're the host rather, and you're in a city that you don't know the restaurant, they've picked it, you're paying the bill, so the wine list automatically comes to you. And if you have 6 people, if you have 8 people, some of these wine lists are, 30, 40, 50, 60 pages in length, and navigating them is a Herculean task. So I wanted to make certain that this evening, as people are getting ready to start dining out, that they have the opportunity to come up with, from your vantage point, a couple foolproof ideas and suggestions and strategies on how to make certain they pull that off without a hitch. And for those of you in the Chicago area, there's a little restaurant in Roscoe Village called Volo, where Meghan actually designed that entire wine program and wine list. So it's an exceptional wine list. So let's start there. How does a restaurant go about designing their wine list, and what are some of the things they look for in the design?
So there are a lot of factors. The primary factor, I think, is the overall theme of the restaurant. If we're talking fine dining, that's going to be a very different list than if we have, a relatively casual motif. If we have a French-focused restaurant, we're likely to have a very French-focused wine program. Another thing that we look at is the neighborhood itself. Even as a destination restaurant, you're going to think about what neighborhood you're in. So if you think about Chicago, to use that as an example, looking at a restaurant in the West Loop is going to be a very different experience than going to Volo, as an example. Another factor that we consider is, who is our target clientele? Who do we expect to come in here? What level of wine knowledge do they have? How adventurous do they want to be? And about how much do we think they want to spend on any given item? And then there's the less romantic, more fact-checked part of it, which is storage. Do I have storage for a 100-bottle list, or do I need to keep it small to where I only have, maybe 20 bottles available at any given time, which is, for people who have not worked in the restaurant industry before, is not something that I think you would think about necessarily.
No, it's funny you say that, because I literally just said to myself, like, I'm I've never even thought about storage. And and you're right, because if you've got a 100-bottle list, that requires some significant storage space.
Exactly. Yeah, it really does. And storage is, especially in the bigger cities, especially in the more populated areas of those cities, it comes at a premium, and you are using every square inch of space you have. So
yeah, it's quite unlike Vegas, where people see this beautiful wine cellar that's out in the open and it's surrounded by glass. Very few of those exist in major cities. It's usually cubby holes, and you're climbing up ladders, and there's bins and down in the basement. Exactly. So space is an absolute premium. Is there, the owner of the restaurant or the restaurant group kind of sets the budget to say, hey, I want you to, the average bottle price should be here. You can have a percentage above that, or how do they, make the economic blend?
That's a great question. I think in my experience and in my opinion, I think the best way for that to work is for the sommelier to work with the owner or manager to come up with that budget, rather than one or the other of them doing that. That makes sure that the wines are priced appropriately, and the restaurant is making an appropriate percentage on them.
And I also think it's interesting how some wine lists have bin numbers and some wine lists don't. And you have to be very careful, because it seems I don't know if they do this intentionally, but bin number 1142 is $105. Bin number 1146 is $1,050. And the two are right next to each other on the wine list. So you have to be very careful which one you're pointing to. Otherwise, I'm not saying it happened to me more than once. You get a very expensive bottle of wine.
And sometimes that works in your favor if the sommelier is doing their job correctly and it was their mistake. Sometimes you get a wonderful bottle of wine for a fraction of the cost, and other times you are on the other end of that situation where you get to try something you never thought that you would.
Nope, and you have to explain that to the CFO during the expense account aspect.
Exactly, but that's why it's important to always verify that specifically what you ordered is what's on the label.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that. So you order a wine off the wine list. Well, let's get into the ordering process. Let's say I am brand spanking new, I'm entertaining clients, and there's 8 of us at the table, and someone hands me the wine list because I'm the host, and I am petrified, deer in the headlight type of stuff. I have no idea how to navigate this. What are some of the elements or questions I can ask you as the sommelier to help guide me and make certain I don't look like a fool?
Yes, great question. So I think the number one thing in that specific situation where it's sort of thrust upon you that you're choosing wine for the group is to not be afraid of the sommelier. The sommelier does not expect you to have the level of wine knowledge or even anywhere close to what they do. They are in that role for a reason. That's why you go to an accountant to have your taxes done and not to, me. You need experts for everything. So I think that's the number one most important thing, is to not be intimidated. And, I think as time goes on, the wine industry in general and hospitality, we've become a little less stuck up, if you will, about our industry, and a little more welcoming and understanding of the fact that, most people aren't going to get to the level of geekiness that we get to. Additionally, because they work in hospitality and have chosen a career in which they're working with guests, every night they come into work, they have become masters at assessing everything from personality to income level to wine knowledge to food knowledge to just general worldliness within seconds of seeing you before even speaking to you. They're fantastic at reading people and reading between the lines. So I think that's my number one tip. My second tip would be to talk about, here's what we're thinking of ordering. Ideally, you would have had a cocktail, maybe a glass of champagne when you sat down. Everybody's hopefully decided what it is they're going to order. So you can explain to the sommelier that you probably have, assume you're going to have steak and fish and chicken and maybe all these different sorts of dishes. And they are also experts not only on their wine list because they're the ones creating it, but they're also experts on the menu. So they'll know almost instantaneously what bottle of wine or bottles of wine could potentially fit all of those requirements.
That's a great point, because Chef Wook and John have been on a couple episodes of SIP, and one of the things that they talk about is know your protein. So that would be a question, to ask the somm to say, hey, we're going to have chicken, or to ask, what is the protein? How is it cooked? And then what sauces and spices come with it? Those 3 elements, so that can help guide the table or guide you. I can imagine it would be difficult if someone says, we're having lobster, we're having chicken, we're having whitefish, and we're having filet and, a tomahawk. So you've got 4 or 5 different types of protein. Is there ever a challenge where that should require 3 or 4 different types of wine, but you don't want to come off as pushing more wine on them than they're comfortable with?
I don't think so. Honestly, I think, in that situation, especially if you have a group of, 6, 7, 8 plus people, you are going to require more than 1 bottle of wine anyways. By ordering something that can accommodate the lighter dishes and something that can accommodate the heavier dishes, you're really giving people the choice of what they'd like to do.
Well, that's a great point. And Charisse has a good question. Could you give them the name of a wine that you love that is probably not on their list as a comparison?
You can. It's not guaranteed that they will know that specific wine. If it's, if it's a very well-known winery, of course they're going to know what it is. If it's something a little more boutique, they might. I mean, these are people that have dedicated their entire careers to a single beverage, so it can't hurt. But I think that's also an important tip is, even if they don't know that specific winery, if you say, I really enjoy, very lean Sauvignon Blancs. I don't like any butter. I am totally averse to any sweetness. Like, giving them any guidelines as far as that goes helps them to eliminate wines that might not work for you.
And is it better to pick the wine first or the food first?
That's a great question. And in my opinion, it completely depends on the occasion. There have definitely been occasions where, I'm at a restaurant with a group of friends. I think this probably actually happened with you and Denise on more than one occasion, where we find like this just amazing bottle of wine. And we're like, we have to get this wine. You don't see this everywhere. This is like, it's like a sideways thing, like we have to drink it. So in that case, then you pick the food based on the wine. But of course,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, of course, there's the flip side of that, where you're going to a restaurant because you're very excited about the food and the chef. And in that case, the wine becomes a little bit secondary.
So getting back to kind of the somm's skill of assessing the clientele, how do they do that? And is that something that is taught kind of in the guild or court or WSET to say, here's some benchmarks?
That's a great question.
That's Jeff's question. I can't take credit for that.
Oh, that makes sense, actually. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. No, it's nothing that's not part of the curriculum that's taught. It's more a skill set that's acquired over, weeks and
thousands of interactions and
interaction after interaction. It's something that, I think almost anybody can develop. But it's not something that is specifically taught when you get sommelier certifications or go through that program.
So if I'm holding my wine glass like this, am I a knowledgeable individual on wine, or am I in trouble?
You're disowned from my family, for one thing. Yes, always want to hold your wine glass by the stem. I see Cherie, she says so much trouble, she knows. Yep, always want to hold your wine glass by the stem for a few different reasons. One, holding it by the bowl will warm it up. Your hands are warm. Doesn't matter if it's a red wine or a white wine, it's going to become warmer. Additionally, it's going to put fingerprints all over the glass. So technically, we wouldn't want that to happen. And thirdly, you can't swirl appropriately.
Right.
If you're holding it by the bowl.
Yeah, the premature warming of the white wine, not good. And the occlusion from an assessment standpoint with the fingerprints, also not good.
Yep.
A couple more questions. Brent, good question. Is it more important to pair the wine with the protein or with the sauce/preparation of said protein?
Oh, another good question. I like it. Honestly, I think that really depends on the specific dish. I think your primary focus should definitely be the type of protein, so if we're talking about like steak versus fish, clearly there's going to be a difference there. And secondary would be, what kind of sauce is on that. So if we're talking about, like a white fish with some kind of a tomato-based sauce, you may not want to go with a white wine or a rosé for that. You might want to go with a very light-bodied red, like a Beaujolais. Could be a good fit with that.
Perfect. It's very helpful to have someone who is a wine professional and chef answering these questions. So thank you for that. Speaking of questions, I'm going to throw up a poll question because I know that there's folks that are undefeated and they pride themselves on not missing a single question. We're going to try something new this week. I hope it works. So what price is the most popular when ordering at a restaurant? So there's a woman ordering wine from a very extensive wine list. $10 to $25, $26 to $35, $35 to $50, over $50.
Are we talking for a bottle, correct?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
The most popular price bracket when ordering wine by the bottle at a restaurant in the United States. Depending upon how you answer will indicate who or when or if we ever meet.
Martin, Ivy is saying that the poll questions are not showing.
People are answering them.
Oh,
I've got 14 answers. 15 going, we're going to say this ends in 5, 4, 3. Dahlia says it shows for us. You need to scroll. Donna indicated. See, I threw the pictures in there. All right, 3, 2, 1. Megan, do you have a thought?
I think 35 to 50.
The correct answer is 26 to 35. Now that had an answer percentage breakdown of 24% of the people surveyed. The next closest one was in fact 35 to 50 that had, I believe, 19%. There was also a fair amount that ordered that said, I never order wine by the bottle. I only order wine by the glass. And then disappointingly so, and I shed a tear over this during the research period, less than 1% of people bring their own wine to the restaurant. So let's talk about bringing your own wine, because as you know very well, Cellar Angels, these wines are not in distribution. So it's quite unlikely that they're ever going to be in a restaurant. So what is the proper etiquette and protocol for wanting to bring in a couple of your own bottles to a restaurant?
So number one is making sure the restaurant allows that. Most nicer restaurants will allow that with a corkage fee. There are some out there that just don't want to play that game. So check the website. You can call and ask. Of course, ask what the corkage fee is. And when you come in, I would suggest bringing the wine in a smaller, nicer container. You don't want to come in with, grocery bag full of wine, especially if we're talking about a nicer restaurant.
That's getting back to sizing up the clientele very quickly. So you walk in with a Trader Joe's bag.
Exactly. And if you pull out a box of Franzia, like we talked about earlier, like there's going to be some raised eyebrows.
Yes.
Secondly, please allow your server or sommelier to open the wine for you. Even though you've brought the wine in, they would prefer to serve you as they are there to do. Lastly, I find that it goes a long way to offer your server or sommelier a taste of the wine that you bring in.
Absolutely. And it's funny, Charisse, great question. Doesn't bringing wine take money away from the restaurant?
That is a great question. Yes, it does. And that's why they charge a corkage fee. So restaurants run on razor thin margins, just their food margins are, if they're lucky, less than 5% over cost, very, very small margins. So by marking up alcoholic beverages of all sorts, not just wine, that's really where they make up the difference. And for you as a guest, it's important to know that you're supporting the restaurant as a whole when you buy wine. So even if you see a wine on the wine list that you can get for a fraction of the cost at a store down the road, understand that that markup goes to supporting the restaurant and the staff completely.
Interesting. And I love the idea of, and Dahlia says the same thing, of offering the somm or your wine steward a sip or a sample or what have you. Even if you don't bring wine in and you order a nice bottle of wine, I think it's a great courtesy to say, hey, would you like to try some? And that gets me back to kind of the ordering process and the opening process. So now I've seen some restaurants where you pick the bottle, they bring you the bottle, they show it to you tableside, but then they take it back and open it out of sight and then bring whatever 6 stems with the bottle to the tableside. Is there a protocol that is the standard? I get a little nervous that they're swapping out the wine I picked for something jug wine and throwing it in the bottle very quickly, and I'm none the wiser. Walk me through that panic-stricken grief stage.
You will not have to worry about that at almost every single restaurant. First of all, the clientele would stop coming back. Because there are going to be some people in there who definitely know wine, definitely know the specific wine that they're ordering, and they will know if it's been switched out. So that's not a concern. When the sommelier is taking the wine away before and not opening it at the table, usually they're doing that so they can taste the wine and make sure that it's not flawed in any way. And they don't like to do that in front of guests, because more often than not, they're tasting it and spitting it out. And of course, you don't want them doing that tableside. That would probably ruin your appetite a little bit.
Yes.
And if you're ordering an older bottle of wine, a wine that needs to be decanted, then of course that's a process that most restaurants are also don't want to do tableside. Just one, probably for space, but then two, just to make sure that the tablecloth doesn't get splashed on or anything along those lines.
Awesome. All right. I know we're going to be turning cameras on at the bottom of the hour for those folks that are so inclined. So I'm going to hang on, Peter. I'm looking at your questions. Okay, I have to get back to those. The second poll question, I hope. Getting back to the assessment of the clientele can also assess the wine list. So what is the largest indicator the restaurant, and restaurant spelled wrong, whoever put the notes in is spelled wrong. What is this largest indicator that the restaurant list is substandard? The list is laminated with magic marker scratch outs over the vintages. No wines are available outside the US. There are no vintages listed for any of the wines. The wine list has both Meiomi and Cupcake as by the bottle selections. See, and Megan tipped her hand there because she was laughing, and she's not supposed to laugh at this. Oh, you can.
I don't have an opinion at all, I swear. I'm Switzerland.
It should be, it's almost as, it could be all of the above. And this gets into an interesting topic that I want to touch upon as soon as these answers come in. So the list is laminated. No wines outside the US are available. There are no vintages listed on any of the wines, and the wine list has both Meiomi and Cupcake as selections. I'm going to give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Megan, what is your assessment for a list when you walk into a restaurant with your significant other and you look at the list and you just go, oh gosh, what is the dud giveaway that they just mailed it in?
For me, the very first indication, well, if it were laminated, that would do it right there. I'll put it that way. But outside of that, if I see Meiomi and Cupcake and any of the grocery store brands, if you will, that's a dead indicator to me that they're just not trying, and right. I think it makes sense for certain restaurants to, sometimes they do need to have some of those wines on their list to appease their clientele. However, if it's only those types of wines, then I'm disappointed in general, and I'm probably going to order a gin and tonic instead.
I was just going to say, you see that, and then it's immediately to cocktails or craft beer.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The largest indicator, 13 of you got it correct, is the fact that there's no vintages on the wine list whatsoever. And Megan can speak from experience, because putting together a wine list at a restaurant is a never-ending, very, very arduous task. And especially for the ones that print out the wine list and it's custom printed, and all of a sudden the vintage changes. You will see some folks put like a little piece of whiteout on that and then write 2004. That's not good. That if they're going to take that shortcut, what other shortcuts are they taking? And so you start asking those things, and it takes a ton of time to put a good list together. Mission Control and I, when we look at a wine list, we instantly know who the distributors are, what percentage of the wine list is from what distributor, and okay, no one has put a lot of effort into this. Let's just see what the cocktails are like. So good job, group. The team was spot on both of those. As it gets to ordering from an extensive wine list, let's say it's very well put together, Italian, Spanish, French, all the French regions, New World, Old World. Is it still possible, if you are a novice in any of those regions, to bring the somm over and hold the list up and point to a price in the wine list and tell the somm, I'm looking for something from this region? And while the table thinks you're actually pointing to a geographic region, you're pointing to a dollar amount. Is that still done?
Yep, it happens all the time. It's not at all uncommon in the industry. It's a wonderful, very subtle way to convey what you'd like to the sommelier without, having to say out loud what your budget is. And that's especially important if we're talking about a business meeting. Of course, you don't want them to, your guests to think that you're, being cheap with them, or that you're being really extravagant, maybe with coworkers. So it's a really great little trick that anybody can use, and that any sommelier, any server in the industry is likely to know.
Great. I thought that was so subtle years ago when I learned it, and I'm like, this is pure genius. You don't come off looking like a fool. The wine professional knows exactly what you're doing and isn't going to recommend something 3x the price that you're pointing to, and everybody's happy. You're happy, and no one's the wiser.
Right. Well, and the other part of that is, if you're at a restaurant with a decent wine list, they should have great wine at every price point. If it's a $15 bottle of wine or a $115 bottle of wine, that sommelier should be able to stand behind each one of those wines and appreciate them for what they are. And at a lot of the nicer wine-focused restaurants, that's exactly what they do. These people are, they're passionate about wine and food and hospitality. They like absolutely nothing more than finding the perfect wine to go with your meal. And ideally, maybe even introducing you to something that you've never had before.
No, I think is where part of the joy comes in, is when you put yourself in their hands and you give them a dollar amount and say, we're a blank canvas. Go ahead and knock it out of the park. Pick something that you think, whether it's obscure or, off the beaten path, that maybe you don't have a lot of. It's kind of fun to throw caution to the wind and let the wine professional, work their magic.
Oh, it's wonderful. And that's, I do that on a regular basis. I mean, obviously I'm in the wine industry and have been for a long time, but I'll regularly go to restaurants and ask the sommelier to pick a bottle based on whatever parameters I give them, because I just want to see what they'll come up with. And I've never been disappointed, not a single time. Super
cool. And what about degustation menus where the restaurant has paired, 6 courses with wines? Can we trust that pairing? Have they really tasted it and paired it together? Walk us through that whole process.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is one of the best parts of the job, actually, is to do the research and development on, on pairing menus. We absolutely love it. The chefs love it. Typically what will happen, or ideally, maybe I should say what would happen, is the chef teams up with a sommelier, and they have the specific dish that they'd like to taste with at least one, if not 2 wine options for each dish.
Right.
Now, depending on the scale of the restaurant, there might be more extensive R&D that goes into it. So if we're talking about, Alinea, they are probably going to test out more wines than you might get at, a more moderately priced restaurant. But
Olive Garden.
Right. I can guarantee that, Martin. But yeah, there's a lot of thought that goes into the guest experience, from the perspective of the staff in restaurants. And people who work in hospitality are, again, very, very passionate about making sure that you have a wonderful experience. And that is much more nuanced and detailed than I think people may realize.
And for those of you outside the Chicago area, the restaurant Megan just referenced, Alinea, is, I don't know where it ranks today, but it was for years one of the top 10 restaurants in the United States. Grant Anches is the chef there, and it's a pretty spectacular dining experience. Jeff and Jane eat there 2 or 3 times a week, and it's pretty special if you want to dine with them. They have waxed poetically about the degustation pairings there that are just otherworldly. So I envy the somm who gets that job to sit down with the chef and say, okay, let's mix and match and put together some stuff based upon the chef exercising his or her culinary chops to say, I want to create this dish and I want you to pair a wine around it. So it's always fun. That's great tip and great advice. Chef's Table season 2 has an episode on that in Netflix. I did not know that.
Also, I would like to be friends with Jeff and Jane if they're eating at Alinea 2 or 3 nights a week.
All angels are welcome at their table. What sort of tips do you have when there is no somm, or worse, they're not interested in helping your table?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think you'd be hard pressed to find that situation, honestly. But if you are, I think the most important thing is to stick with what you know in that situation. If you know that you love Pinot Noir from,
Willamette.
Willamette Valley, maybe the Dundee Hills specifically, possibly Dusky Goose, which is the winery I work for, everyone. But if you already know that you enjoy that, I would stick with what you know in that situation. If you're in a situation where you're with a group of colleagues and you're ordering for everyone, then I would suggest taking a poll. Who prefers Pinot Noir, who prefers Cabernet, et cetera, and kind of taking it from there based on the feedback of the group.
Yeah, the polling of the group is extremely important, and you can also do it in the somm's presence, so that you, especially if you have guests, clients, and stuff like that, that you may not know well, and you're meeting them for the first time. You know one contact person, and now you're taking out a department, or you're taking out 6 people or spouses. And you can say, so what do we want? Bubbles, white, red, and then you can decide on a color. What are we thinking about for price? Are we looking at, 40, 70, 100? And then people will chime in and say, 80 is good, 60 is good. And then that way you have a color and you've got a price, and then the somm can do their work.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the polling option. Great question. So let's talk. You talked earlier about razor thin margins on food, and we know that is not the case for wine. And it depends. Obviously, I've seen as high as 400 and 500% markup and those sorts of things. So for those of us in the wine industry, for me personally, it's always very hard to get wine out unless it's a special occasion, because I know what the margin is, and it's challenging. And people always ask me, what's your favorite wine to order at a restaurant? I'm like, my favorite wine is called beer or cocktail at a restaurant, just because I know it's very simple and not a 200% markup. But let's go to the buy the glass program. And it's some restaurants have great BTG programs. Some restaurants, again, mail it in. Is there an industry standard with a glass of wine costing X and what that equates to?
No. There is not. There's I'd say guidelines, but there's not a hard and fast calculation as far as that goes. Some restaurants will drastically mark up their wine list. A good rule of thumb is to assume that whatever the cost of that glass is how much that restaurant is paying for the bottle.
Okay.
However, that is not always the case. So if you see a glass of Cabernet for $10, assume that the restaurant paid $10 for the whole entire bottle.
Yep.
However, there are definitely situations, especially with higher end glass pours, where more than likely the restaurant's probably taking a cut of their usual margin because they're so excited and passionate about that particular wine, and they want to pour it by the glass, that they'll make up the money somewhere else. They'll have a higher margin on a different item. And
then that part about, like, if I see a Sauvignon Blanc for $12 a glass, I'm 99% confident that they paid $12 for the bottle, and they're going to try to get 5 pours out of that. So they're going to, spend the 12 on the bottle and then get $48 of revenue on the Sauv Blanc. Is there a problem if you look at the back of the bar where they grab the bottle from, and that it's been sitting there for 8 hours, asking them to open up another bottle?
I would suggest tasting it first, asking for a small taste before you assume that the wine isn't tasting good after having been open. But there should not be any issue whatsoever if you taste, the bottle that you think has been open for hours, if it is not tasting appropriately. There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be more than happy to open another bottle for you.
Right. And I'll tell you, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say another factor to consider when thinking about ordering a glass or a bottle is, in a restaurant, one bottle of wine equals like 4 to 5 glasses. So if your group as a whole is going to have more than that, it just makes more sense to order the bottle.
Right. Or it's one glass if you're using the BV7, just hypothetically from Bottega del Vino. And Dalia, you're correct. Not always. There are some restaurants, interestingly enough, that pride themselves on their wine programs and where the markups are like 1.25%. I mean, it's very minimal. And one that comes to mind is Legal Seafoods in Boston. I mean, it's a chain, but their wine program is off the charts. And the two owners are huge wine fans. And they've said repeatedly, we don't want people paying an arm and a leg for wine. So interestingly enough, I've bought wine there for less expensive than I've seen at retail outlets in the Chicago area. And it's, Quintessa and super killer wine where you're just going, wow, that's $90 a bottle. It's 130 in stores. So find those restaurants.
Interesting thing, Martin, is at many restaurants, actually the higher priced wines tend to have lower markups.
Correct.
Because the sommelier knows that if they were to use their usual markup, most people aren't going to buy the wine. So you actually get a lot of times a better value with those higher priced wines than you're paying less markup than you would with the lower inexpensive wines.
No, that's interesting. And it makes perfect sense because if, the Lynch-Bage 2005 is $225 retail, they're not going to sell it for $500.
Right.
So it might be $280 or $300. So that's actually, if you're going to splurge, that's a good idea to do that. Is there anything other than, bringing wine to the restaurant? I definitely would call ahead in advance and find out if there's a corkage fee. For the record, there's a very famous restaurant in Chicago that is now defunct called Charlie Trotter's, and it was one of the premier eateries in the world for many, many years. I brought 4 bottles of wine there, and they had a 30 some odd thousand bottle cellar. But I also broke a cardinal rule. I brought them in a gym bag, so that didn't look very classy when you bring. I know, Jeff, help me. It was not good.
I wasn't going to call you out on that today for that, Martin. So that's all on you.
And by the way, we were with a winemaker from Napa, so it was fine. But yeah, $50 bottle corkage fee. So when you think about those restaurant wine lists, we spent $200 in corkage fees, but easily we would have spent $800 to $1,000 in wine had we not brought our own wine. Is there, other than making certain that the wine you bring to the restaurant isn't on their wine list, and that you bring it in a classy packaging or bag, and that you offer the somm a taste sample of it, is there anything that they should not do, or that they should, to enhance that experiment or experience?
So yeah, like I mentioned, definitely allow the team, the sommelier, the server to open the wine. If it needs decanting, decant the wine and pour the wine for you. And as always, spreading the love goes a long way. So, don't forget to offer that little taste.
Excellent. And I also want to give Megan a plug because we have yet to feature or film a winery in Oregon. And I'm of the belief that will be remedied soon. So why don't you tell us what your new gig is? It's not really that new, but where you are and what you're doing and why you're excited about it.
Absolutely. So I'm the National Sales Directory for Dusky Goose Winery, Dusky Goose Winery. We're in the Dundee Hills of Willamette Valley, Oregon. This is our 20th anniversary, and you might recognize our winemaker's name, Lynn Penner-Ash. So if you're not familiar with Lynn Penner-Ash, she is one of the most famous, if not the most famous female winemaker, certainly in Oregon, and definitely in the US. So we're very lucky to have her on board.
And what is case production?
We're right around 4,000 to 5,000 cases produced each year. So we definitely fall into that boutique category. We're not available in every state. And we have a much higher focus on quality than quantity. So we don't make much wine, but what we do is, in my completely biased opinion, pretty exquisite.
Oh, nice. There's nothing wrong with a biased opinion. Yeah. If it was other than that, you wouldn't be there, right?
Exactly. I can't sell wine I don't like.
No, nor should you. I do want to share one part of the screen. As I mentioned earlier in the program, the Acenti wine is going to be next week's guest with Lorenza and James. However, for those folks that were on the SIP trip, technically not a SIP trip, the video is up. So several of you have cameos in this video. And that's what happens. You guys thought you signed a waiver. You did not sign a waiver. We can use your likeness. We can use your images. Everything is fair game. So for those of you that were on that trip, I definitely encourage you to stop by the Achenti part of the website and go ahead and watch that video. It just got loaded this afternoon. I also want to show, and Jeff, the Cellar Angels bag works. That's a great bag to use for bringing wine in. I'm sure Megan would agree.
100%.
100%. Let's talk a little bit about great trips and more. So we're featuring the Waxwing this week because as I mentioned, there's only 5 left. And by the way, Jeff, anytime you go to Alinea, Peter Glick wants to know, just name the date and time, other Chicago, and he will be there. Those of you that are new, I mentioned at the onset that we focus exclusively on Napa and Sonoma right now, but there's people that want us to focus on other regions in the world, and that will probably be happening soon. So this for us is where we play, the Napa and Sonoma regions. And most people are always surprised to see just how much larger Sonoma is than Napa as a county anyways. And also they just have the most recent new AVA. So the Fort Ross Seaview AVA way out in just wild, rugged terrain area that produces some massively complex Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that is not hot, but just beautiful area is out here. But recently when we did this trip, I want to show you what we did. So this little triangle is where we spent all of our time in Sonoma. And if you have the opportunity to fly into Sonoma, you should do it. All of us have flown into SFO, but right down here is the Charles Schultz Airport. And Santa Rosa now is getting more and more traffic. There are direct flights from many major cities, Denver, Phoenix, a lot of places in California. I think Dallas has a direct flight now. So it's awesome because you are literally minutes from the vineyards, minutes from the tastings. And it's just so convenient. I hope more traffic comes into there. They are building a brand new terminal, which should obviously, if you build it, they will come type of scenario. But it's a great little airport from a convenience standpoint. So we stayed, as luck would have it, at the Vizsla property, which is the view from the deck is behind me. So it is not a bad place to stay. There's a pool. It's got a 5-bedroom house. I highly recommend it. You are literally in the vines. And from there, I'm going to back out because this is crazy to look at it from that far or that close. From there, and all these wines are going to be hitting Cellar Angels very, very soon. So you've got Bacchus Landing up here where we featured Dot Wines last week, and Montan Roos is there. We spent too much time there. Thankfully, we had a designated driver. That was a mistake. Then we have Ketchum Estates, awesome Pinot Noir producer. You want to talk about Megan Pinot crazy? She has 6 different clones of Pinot on her property. And yeah, she is crazy for Pinot, right just off, steps away from the Russian River and one of its tributaries. Then a winery that blew us all away. I think most would agree that Kaluna right here is up on top of this mountain, and it's a private residence. And you have 360-degree views up here of the entire Sonoma Valley. And it is something to behold. All hand planted, all hand harvested. The gentleman whose wine we're featuring, he went to Bordeaux to enroll in university to learn from the ground up how to make the best wine possible. He's been dedicating, 30 plus years to this. The wine is ridiculous. And then last but not least on our Sonoma stop was a wine called Monroy. You will never find this wine. You will never see this wine. This, if for those of you that know this logo, this is Benovia. Now, Benovia is a pretty hands-on boutique 3,000 case producer in the Russian River Valley in Sonoma. However, this gentleman makes his wine in their facility because he's the assistant winemaker there. He does barrel fermentation of Cabernet Sauvignon. And when you see the video for this, changing the head of a barrel and fermenting it, you have to be very careful how much leaks out. It's an incredibly physical process doing all of this. But that is coming up as well. And that was just the Sonoma trip. So next week, we're going to share with you what happened on the Napa trip and how awesome that was, because this is what we want to do, is get you immersed in wine country. You are not going to be standing 4 people deep at a tasting. You're going to be sitting down with the owners and learning everything about the craft, oftentimes at their home, and learning the story and the passion behind it, just like Megan talks about. I mean, these people have dedicated most of their lives to this passion, to this beverage. And that is something that you need to taste to experience. And as we say at Cellar Angels, taste the thrill. Jeff, we did have a designated driver who often took liberties with the red lights. So we made good time, though, just FYI, just made very good time. Adolfo was amazing. Megan, final tip on how to be a rock star with the wine list.
As far as from a customer standpoint?
Yep.
Be adventurous. There is a whole big, beautiful world of wine out there. Wine is a Pandora's box. I've been in the wine industry for a long time, 10, 15 years, and I feel like I know about that much of it. So don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to listen to your experts, and just keep tasting.
No, I like that idea too. Go try something the opposite of what you normally go to. I mean, if you're a Napa cab person, go Old World, go something else, but expand the horizons, because it's good and bad news, right? Because all of a sudden you're going to get blown away, and then you think, wow, now I've got to start researching South African wine because that was incredible. I mean, there's pros and cons to it, but it is certainly a whole big wine world out there. What is the most gratifying aspect of it? Because you come at it from a bunch of different angles. You've got a great distribution background, you have a retail and sales background, you're a chef, and now you're the director of national sales for a small boutique winery in Oregon. Which one of those is the most gratifying, and what is it about this industry that still excites you?
You know, I think I can't pick one particular role that's more gratifying than the others. For me, it is 100% introducing people to wines that they have not tried before and opening their eyes to, a new aspect of the wine industry. And it's always changing. It's very dynamic. There's always something to learn. Anybody who says they know everything there is to know about wine is lying, because there is always something new, a new rabbit hole to go down, and that's what keeps it interesting.
No, that's a great point. And then Peter had a fantastic question. Does a table need to tip the somm individually, different than the waiter?
You are welcome to do that. In most restaurants, it is definitely not expected. Absolutely not expected. The sommelier typically is paid for their expertise. They may even be a salaried employee at some of the nicer restaurants. But if you feel like they've done an excellent job and really gone above and beyond, I can't imagine that they would be offended.
All right, that leads me to a question on the somm. So you order a $200 bottle of wine, and the somm brings the wine to the table and goes through the entire process of opening, decanting, pouring. You order a $1,000 bottle of wine, and the exact process ensues and is the same. Do you tip on the 1,000? Do you tip on the 200? How does that all work?
I would tip somewhere in between. If it were me, I would sort of split the difference, if you will.
Okay, interesting, because I've always wondered, it's like you're doing the same amount of work. So if the wine is more expensive, why am I tipping more for the exact same effort?
So here's where the interesting aspect comes in. It might not be the same effort, actually. If you're ordering a $1,000 bottle of wine, my guess is it's probably going to be a little bit of an older bottle of wine, meaning it's going to require, potentially using special tools like an osso to open it. It may have to be decanted. And it takes that expertise to know, okay, is this wine just appropriately aged or has it gone bad? Because sometimes, very honestly, like you taste some of these older wines, especially things like older Bordeaux, sometimes older Burgundy, and they have some of those like raisiny aromas and flavors. And so understanding the difference between that and a bottle that's over the hill is one of the reasons why you utilize as a sommelier.
No, and I agree with you. If the cork is degraded in any way, shape, or form, and you've got to perform surgery to get that out, and the ASO may or may not be working as appropriately as it should, and that's always nerve-wracking table side. So I'm sure they must love those opportunities. But
Oh,
yeah,
I'm-
I agree with you.
But again, it's not expected necessarily that you tip your sommelier.
Awesome. 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 Thank you so much. I want to raise a glass to Megan. That flew by the way. Cheers to you. And as I said, next week we have Lorenza and James from Achenti. You want to be amazed. These two people met at a winemaking university in Europe. And what better way to find your life partner than in a wine school? And then they traveled around great winemaking regions. She went to Portugal, he went to Germany, and then they've come back. She visited him in Napa and fell in love, and they got married, and now they're producing fantastic wines in Napa Valley and Sonoma, and all in regenerative farming. So they are looking at vineyards that are very, very special that may have been neglected and bringing them back to life because of the potential in these vineyards. So we've got 2 wines from them next week. I'm very excited about that. A Pet Nat, which is always fun because it's bubbles and bubbles rock. And then we have, as Denise, as Mission Control said, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I want to leave you with this. 2005, the great Hawaii crooner Jack Johnson had a song called Good People. And in it, he asks, where are the good people gone? Good people are right here every Friday night. You are the good people. Thank you so much for all your support. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Stay cool. From what I understand, there's a lot of hot weather out there. Be good to one another. Cheers, everyone.